Good afternoon, Happy New Year, and welcome to the City Club of Eugene's January 9th, 2026 program, Act Now Lane, Confronting the Housing and Homelessness Crisis Together. My name is Thomas Hura. I serve as president of City Club, and I'm pleased to welcome you to another of the many forums we've held since 1990 in the name of our mission to build community vision through open inquiry. City Club is fortunate to be a widely trusted, open, and independent voice for Eugene area community members to be heard. And as a lifelong Eugenian, I dare say the community is also lucky to have the City Club and to hear from our program guests and questions from the audience, whether here in the beautiful Wow Hall, online, or over the radio. We believe these gatherings and broadcasts around critical community topics strengthen our understanding of one another and ultimately our ability to support the community building work in so many sectors of the Eugene. In today's fractured information landscape, we want to be a space where you can participate in unearthing, disseminating, and sharing relevant information in conversation together. We would love for you to browse our past programs at cityclubofeugene.org or our YouTube or Facebook. Please consider becoming a member if you'd like to support our rigorous volunteer work as Oregon's only city club that provides weekly forums to the community. There are many ways to partner with us, and I'd like to thank our Diamond community sponsors. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. Get more information at uoregon.edu. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. Thank you to the City of Eugene and to Lane County for their generous support as well. Summit Bank is our Sapphire sponsor. We're proud to bank with Summit, and we're grateful for the contributions of Summit's employees to our club and the Eugene community. Now, a quick reminder, please silence all cell phones in the hall. We've got a great turnout tonight. I'm really happy to see all of you here. And with that, I proudly turn the mic over to my colleague on the board and the coordinator of today's program, Alyssa Gilbert.
Hi everyone, welcome to today's forum on Act Now Lane. Act Now Lane is a cross-sector coalition uniting leaders, organizations, and community members to address Lane County's housing and homelessness crisis head-on. Lane County has one of the highest rates of homelessness per capita in the nation, with thousands of individuals in our community living unhoused. Act Now Lane believes this crisis is too complex for any one organization to solve alone, but together we can make a meaningful progress toward lasting solutions. In today's forum, we'll hear from 3 Act Now Lane steering committee members who will speak about the goals of the coalition, which are bringing together diverse voices from nonprofits, businesses, government agencies, educators, neighborhood groups, and unhoused individuals in a collective effort to confront the housing and homelessness crisis in Lane County, reducing the numbers of individuals living unhoused and unsheltered in our community with the long-term vision of making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring, and rallying around shared strategies to address both the immediate needs of those experiencing homelessness and the systemic challenges that contribute to the crisis. So today's speakers are Brittany Quick-Warner, President and CEO of the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce, Karen Sachs, Director of Policy Advocacy and Strategic Relationships at Dev Northwest, and Larissa Ennis, Board Chair of Homes for Good and Senior Manager of Development and Communications at Food for Lane County. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Brittany.
Thanks, Alyssa, and thanks, everyone. Like she said, my name is Brittany Quick-Warner, and I have the honor of serving as the President and CEO at the Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce, and the honor also of serving on the steering committee for Act Now Lane, Advancing Community Together is that acronym. Thank you so much to the City Club for creating a space for these types of conversations, ones that are honest and difficult, and we feel optimistic that things are starting to work. So, some of you may remember back in July of 2023, Karen, myself, and Mike Coughlin were here for a City Club presentation called Ending Homelessness in Eugene, All Hands on Deck. And at that point, we were really introducing a lot of the research that we'd done, a lot of the time that we'd spent learning, reading, listening, having extensive conversations across the community with businesses, nonprofits, city and county staff, police department staff, unhoused individuals themselves, to really try to understand what what's working and what's not working with the way that our community is addressing this homeless crisis. We also were building relationships across sectors that frankly hadn't really been sitting at the same table or talking about this problem together for a long time, if not ever, in our community. So back then we were basically asking, if this crisis is this big and this complex, how do we stop working in silos and fragments and start working like a community that's playing with one playbook? So today we're excited to be back to share that since then, we've really aligned these efforts. We've learned from what the data is telling us, and we've initiated and launched this coalition, Act Now Lane, to really establish that playbook and then help make sure folks are all moving in the same direction. So a little bit of background about what we're actually talking about. So before I share numbers, I want to say this clearly, that data matters. Our chamber feels very strongly that we're making data-driven decisions as a community because it does. It helps us make sure that what we're doing is actually making an impact. But data can also numb us, right? So when I say these numbers, I want you to remember that these are human beings, people that have stories and trauma and talent and potential, and it's important for us to keep that in mind. So as of December, the HMIS system, which is a system that the county uses to help track the individuals who are in our county that are experiencing homelessness, and to collect data and information about where they're accessing services, and et cetera. HMIS, shows that 4,657 people are experiencing homelessness in Lane County as of December. About 74% are here in Eugene, and we have, roughly 1,500 shelter beds. So about 2/3, or 66%, are unsheltered in the county right now. So there's an important detail here. After rising for several years, the unduplicated totals have actually been holding steady over the last couple years. And we found a little bit of hope that January of last year, we hit an all-time high of over 5,100 people, and that number has declined about 500 throughout the course of this year. So there's a lot of reasons why that data ebbs and flows from month to month, and Lane County staff do a lot of work to try to make sure that we can understand those reasons. But generally speaking, we have about 4,600 individuals who are living unhoused in our community. So where are they all from? Where is a question that we get a lot, with some folks assuming that a lot of these individuals are not actually from our community. And we, frankly, as a coalition and as a group of interested parties a few years ago, really pushed on this question to say, this is what a lot of people ask about. Is there a way for us to actually collect that data? Can we do a better job of trying to answer that question? And so the county has begun tracking where people were living when they lost their housing. So the data now shows, after about a year and a half of that, collecting that information, 4 out of 5 people were last housed in Lane County. So in other words, this is our neighbors, more than it's somebody else's problem. But to be fair, that leaves about 20% who weren't last housed in Lane County. And so this is not an either-or conversation. And I think a lot of times we try to draw the line that it's this problem or it's this problem. And the reality is it's both and. We have folks who are living in this community who become unhoused in this community, and we have folks who've come from outside of the area. So if you want to understand how complicated this is, there's another reality check. Of those 4,600 individuals, 60% about have disability, 31% are domestic violence survivors, 45% are chronically homeless, which means they've been homeless for roughly over a year, living on the streets in our community. There's also one hopeful data point that I don't want to skip. Only about 6% have indicated that they're veterans, which shows that a coordinated effort that we actually engaged on several years ago in our community, Operation 365, really moved the needle in that way, and we've been able to sustain that lower percentage of unhoused veterans in our community. We also know that this data is only one part of the story, right? There's also data about the cost of what this crisis is costing our community, and that touches a lot of different areas of our community, right? So our hospitals, our police department and law enforcement, our neighborhoods, our businesses, and our service providers. There's a significant cost, and we know that the funding for this issue, for this crisis, has dwindled over this last year. And there's a lot of really serious conversations happening right now about how are we using those dollars as effectively as we can, and how do we make sure we're resourcing the right parts of this crisis as best as we possibly can. So when we're doing this research and as we've done this learning, we keep coming back to this. You can't talk about the homelessness crisis without talking about housing. Karen's going to talk a little bit more about that. There's a lot of debate about what causes homelessness, behavioral health, addiction, climate, personal choice, etc. But there's some really strong research out there that shows that even if all of those other factors exist in other communities, if you don't have enough housing and your rental prices are significantly higher than other places, you're going to have a higher level of homelessness, and that's what we're experiencing here in Lane County. So we know that this crisis took years to get to the place where it's at, and it's going to take years to get us out of it. Building housing, while it addresses the root cause, it's not a quick and easy and cheap solution. And so we are going to take a long time to build that housing, and we have to address the short, immediate term needs as well, which is shelter. People need a safe place to be and sleep tonight, every night. And services, we can't just shelter people or house people without providing the wraparound services that are actually going to help them get well. So that's mental health, substance abuse, basic health care, case management, employment pathways. And then last is public safety. Quality of life and public space usability matters in this community. It matters for our businesses, their ability to operate, their ability to expand and provide the jobs that are needed, and frankly, the wages and the tax dollars that are needed to actually address this crisis. They are intimately connected, and we can't have these conversations in silos. And that's why we've been really adamant about making sure that the public safety, the services, the shelter, and the housing are all a part of this conversation, that we're addressing it from a holistic standpoint. So Act Now Lane was created to do just that, to bring folks from across different sectors, to align them around a simple vision that we want to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring in this community. And our short-term goal is to reduce the number of individuals living unhoused and unsheltered in our community. Now, we're not here to duplicate efforts. There's a lot of folks working on this, and that was also something we were really intentional about. There's a lot of plans out there. In fact, that was one of the issues that we found, is that we had over a dozen plans in this community that addressed how we wanted to deal with this crisis. And so what we did when we stepped into this is we said, how do we look at all of those plans and find the places that they overlap, find the places where we need to prioritize, and come up with one roadmap that the broader community can follow along with and understand what it is we're doing in this space. So that's what Act Now Lane did. We established this roadmap. It has 12 strategies that align with housing and prevention, with shelter and services, as far as including public safety and street cleanups, and then the underlying structural issues, the system that has to be fixed as well. So Act Now Lane is not a new organization with a new bureaucracy. It's a collective with a steering committee of dozens of partners in this roadmap. And we're focused on doing three things. One is amplifying what's working, so people know where to find it, how to fund it, and how to expand it. With so many people doing this work, it's hard for folks in the general community to even understand what all is going on. Where do I go? How do I have one place to go and learn as much as I can? And then how do we advocate for policy change, for resources, because systems don't shift by just hoping that it will get better. And then advancing shared strategies. If there are conditions that need to be met and coordination that needs to happen, or programs that don't exist that a gap needs to be filled, then we're willing to step into that space. But again, we're really focused on not duplicating efforts with this work. So I'll close this by saying, a lot of people ask, why is the chamber involved in this? Because this isn't just a humanitarian crisis, although it is absolutely that. It's also an economic crisis, a workforce crisis, a public safety and livability crisis, and a regional competitiveness crisis. And it's a community confidence crisis. We heard more than anything when we were doing this research and this outreach that of all these issues that people found, my biggest concern was how hopeless people felt when we talked about this. And you are not going to solve a big, hairy, complicated problem with a whole bunch of people who don't believe that it can be solved in the first place. And so to me, that was the most important thing that we had to figure out a way to address is how do we bring back hope? How do we build confidence for the community to know the people who need to be are around the table, and we're not afraid to rumble with some hard problems, and we're not afraid to call each other out if we need to on the way that we're addressing issues, and we're willing to have those hard conversations together. That to me is what Act Now Lane represents. But I will be honest, I walked into this thinking we're going to make a lot more progress than we already have in these couple of years. And I think we also have to be real with ourselves. It took decades to get us here. It is going to take time to move the needle. But unless people have the sustained energy to do it, we're just going to have these cycles of trying and then stopping and trying and stopping. And so that is our hope. It's why the chamber is at the table. And I had the commitment from my board at the beginning. This is a marathon, not a sprint. It's going to take time, and we're going to have setbacks, but we will start to see some of these wins together, and we have already. With that, I'm going to introduce Karen, who is going to share a little bit about some of those wins, some of the things that we've been able to accomplish together, and talk more about the housing component. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Brittany. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Karen Sachs. I'm the Director of Policy, Advocacy, and Strategic Relationships at Dev Northwest. Dev Northwest is an affordable housing developer, both for rental and homes for ownership, an asset building organization serving all of Lane County and 6 other counties in Oregon. As Brittany mentioned, we need to dramatically increase housing production. In a recent report, it shows that Lane County needs 38,000 new housing units. 26,000 in Eugene alone over the next 20 years to dig out of the hole and keep up with population growth. These homes are needed across the continuum, from affordable rentals to affordable homes for ownership to middle income and market rate units. As an agency that serves multiple counties that includes numerous jurisdictions, we have a unique understanding both to which the extent of our housing crisis is not just isolated to local jurisdictions, and also how other communities within Oregon are working to increase affordable housing development. But the crisis in the supply of housing is showing up starkly here. The average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment is over $1,400. For a family-size 3-bedroom, it's almost $2,300. And that's even if you can find an apartment, as our vacancy rates have hovered over around 4% consistently. The home ownership side doesn't look much better. Median sales prices are around $480,000. After years of disinvestment into housing production, coupled with wages that are not keeping up with housing costs, people are getting pushed further into housing instability and stagnation. We work with renters on a daily basis who are seeking to become first-time home buyers. But as they're paying 40 to 50% of their rent, of their income on rent, their ability to save for a down payment gets further out of reach. So for that family that's seeing that home priced at $480,000, they need to come up with close to $100,000 on a down payment to avoid mortgage insurance. And given the cost of everything, from transportation to groceries to childcare, that can be an insurmountable hill to climb. So the questions become, what can we do? And what's being done? And as you heard Brittany say, and as I'm sure most of you understand, we love a plan in this community. We have lots of community plans that talk about housing, and we have many nonprofits and private developers trying to build housing in this community. However, Act Now Lane recognized that there wasn't a group that was looking at the overarching efforts to both increase housing and help take the steps on actually how we can ramp up housing production. So the first part of Act Now Lane's roadmap is about increasing and preserving housing units. And the coalition created a housing production action team led by Homes for Good and Better Housing Together, along with public, private, and nonprofit representatives working together. Over the past year, that collective has created a GIS mapping tool to identify land that is good and suitable and ripe for development. We've pulled together a number of cost-effective housing models to help figure out how to make more projects pencil in today's tough building climate. And we've been working with developers and the city of Eugene on process improvements, and we're looking at innovative investment options to draw more resources towards housing. In addition, we know that local actions are only part of the solution. We need statewide solutions to spur housing production. So with that in mind, Act Now Lane also has an advocacy action team focused on aligning advocacy efforts for needed policy change related to housing and homelessness. Act Now Lane members jointly advocated during the last state legislative session on several bills. Ones that increase the pathway for middle housing development by expediting the zoning process. Ones that establish pre-approved building plan options and site designs to be replicated across communities. So developers don't have to recreate the wheel in every single development in every single community. Just because there's a river between two communities, we shouldn't have to start from scratch to put housing units on the ground. And also to increase infrastructure investments tied to needed housing development. It's been great to be a part of this effort and to see the community coming together with tangible action to address our housing and homelessness crisis, because this benefits all of us. And over the coming year, we'll stay focused on how we increase the number of feasible projects in the pipeline, how we continue to streamline processes and partnerships and by right affordable housing development, how we continue to advocate for policy changes and more resources, and truly how we stay focused on getting more community members and neighbors talking about the benefit of housing. And this means combating NIMBYism that shows up the strongest at the very local level. It's about changing the narrative around housing. Housing should not be a luxury. The longer we block housing development, the more acute the crisis becomes. We need voices of support showing up at city council meetings, at planning commission meetings, and within your own neighborhood associations. We know we can't develop our way out of this overnight, but the best time to start is today. Everyone deserves a safe and affordable place to call home, and helping ensure that homelessness is rare, brief, and non-recurring requires that there are units available at the price point, at the size, and at the scale needed. Access to housing supports our whole community, from the family that wants to put down roots here to the entrepreneurs who shouldn't have to choose between starting a small business or becoming a homeowner, and to the employers who can rely on a more stable workforce. Thank you.
Adjust this microphone. I'm a little bit shorter than Karen. Hi, everyone. I'm Larissa Ennis. I'm here on behalf of Jacob Fox. Jacob is the executive director of Homes for Good, and he was called away to deal with a family matter. I am the chair of the board of commissioners of Homes for Good, and Jacob sends his regrets. We also have a couple of staff members from Homes for Good here today supporting me/this coalition. So yes, I'm chair of the board of commissioners of Homes for Good, which is Lane County's affordable housing agency. I'm also the senior manager of development and communications for Food for Lane County. I've been a part of the Act Now Lane coalition since its inception a few years ago. A really important reason that I'm on the steering committee is that I have lived expertise with homelessness. I know what it's like to live in a tent and not have your basic sanitation needs met and still have to get up and go to school or go to work. I'm gonna get emotional and I'm not gonna apologize. Or maybe you're living in a van and you're moving that van from place to place every night, and still the cops come and knock on your window in the middle of the night and tell you you have to move along. I know what it's like to feel discarded, disposed, disposable, or invisible. These experiences have had a lasting and profound psychological impact on me. And it's important to me that the perspectives of homeless people be at the table at Act Now Lane. One of the unique things about the coalition is this: it creates a space with a lot of different perspectives. And we've built trust and the respect to have tough discussions about, for example, how we increase safety, accountability, and cleanliness in our public spaces in ways that don't criminalize homelessness, but rather acknowledge that unhoused people don't have their basic needs met, like sanitation, and also are more often the victims of crime. We've talked about how to create a more robust crisis response system so that people aren't cycling between jails, courts, and emergency room like a revolving door if what they really need is treatment for substance use disorder and they want to get better. I want to reiterate that homelessness is a housing problem, and that the only way to solve homelessness is to build housing. And as has been said, that takes time. It's absolutely critical that while we are focusing on housing as a North Star, we support the shelter and services system to meet unhoused people's basic needs while we're working towards that goal. And we need housing of all types. Housing doesn't just mean houses. One of the exciting projects that Homes for Good has completed in the last year is Bridges on Broadway, or BOB. It's in the former Red Lion Inn on Franklin Boulevard. With BOB, Homes for Good created 57 units of permanent supportive housing for people exiting homelessness. Most of the residents moving into BOB are coming from alternative shelters, like community-supported shelters. Moving a person into BOB, therefore, opens up a space in a shelter so that someone who is currently living in a tent or sleeping on the sidewalk can be sheltered at a minimum and start to have those basic needs met, like case management. Two people who have recently moved into Bridges on Broadway from community-supported shelters are Joshua and Grayson, and I've got just a little quote from both of them. On moving into his new studio apartment, Joshua shared, "I'm excited. I can't wait. I mean, I can plug in stuff. I can go to sleep. I can lock my door." I think many of us who are stably housed take for granted that the ability to lock your door at night or charge your phone is fundamental to a sense of safety, well-being, and being a member of a community. Grayson has been in his new apartment at BOB for a little over a month. Grayson says, "When I close the door, it feels like home. It's a good feeling, knowing that I'm here and not out there. It's a step, something that I intend on continuing on to get better, to be better." Housing is the first step to wellness and wholeness for individuals and families and our whole community. So supporting all types of housing, including temporary, alternative, or emergency shelter, is absolutely necessary to move people towards being permanently and securely housed and to solve this crisis. What I've just shared is a real win for the people moving into the BOB and for Homes for Good. Real people's lives are changing for the better. And those are just two examples of real good work that is happening every day. And it's happening because our local shelter and services providers are working hard every day to stabilize people coming in from the cold or the heat or the wet. And because affordable housing providers like Homes for Good are building housing that meets our community's needs. But note that it took more than just two organizations to create that opportunity. Joshua and Grayson wouldn't be living at the BOB if the Oregon State Legislature hadn't provided funding for Project Turnkey back in 2020, which, when they purchased disused hotels to shelter people who had lost their homes to the Labor Day fires. This was out-of-the-box thinking, and we need more out-of-the-box thinking like that. Bridges on Broadway wouldn't have happened if Lane County hadn't said yes when Homes for Good proposed converting those rooms into permanent housing. And it wouldn't have happened if community-supported shelters didn't have local donors and the support of the community. What you're hearing is the work of a system, multiple players and multiple levels from the hyperlocal, literally in your backyard, to the federal. And you're hearing about multiple funding streams too, from the federal dollars that provide project-based vouchers to subsidize local affordable housing units, to the emergency state funding that purchased the hotel that became Bridges on Broadway, all the way to local donors giving monthly to our shelters to help our unhoused neighbors live in dignity and peace. That's one powerful example of how members of Act Now Lane are solving our homelessness crisis. Real, measurable impact, people's lives being changed. Another way that Act Now is stepping in to advance the work of partners is employment. We have incredible shelter providers in our community, but we found that they didn't have a lot of information about or avenues for their clients to gain professional skills or find employment. And that's not their mission. But we saw the gap, and we said, we can do something about this. So over the last few years, Act Now Lane, the Eugene Chamber, the major shelter and employment organizations, Food for Lane County, Viking Textile Maker Hub, Shift Community Cycles, and others have been working to help increase the number of job training and employment pathways for folks living at the shelters. This ranges from updating resumes and job-seeking help to creating a training program for unhoused people to learn warehouse skills, sewing skills, bike repair skills. We're having great success with dozens of clients completing the training, sometimes multiple trainings, which is really cool, and many going on to find stable employment and even housing. And lastly, I want to share an area that I have personally spent a lot of time on with Act Now Lane, which is amplifying the good work that is happening. A lot of people don't know about the good work that's happening. All we hear is despair, and what you see when you see people living outside is sad. It ignites pain in all of us. But if we hear more and know more about the work that is happening, I think that hope will start to come back. As Brittany said, we're not trying to duplicate. There has been too much duplication of effort in the past, but we're identifying those existing efforts, aligning them, filling in the gaps, and then telling the story, amplifying the good work that is happening. And we want to make it easier to find resources and to get involved. To do this, we established a communications action team. We created a website, and that's actnowlane.org. And we recently launched social media profiles on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Over the coming year, we're going to be adding a lot of information and resources to those channels. So we encourage everyone to sign up for our e-news and to follow us online to hear the good work happening and find out about how you can help. We've also been connecting with community groups, and we would love to present to civic clubs, your Rotary, your church club, business groups, neighborhood groups, that kind of thing. There's a page on our website, actnowlane.org, to request a presentation. And pretty soon we're going to have some general community talks, and we'll be announcing those via our e-news and social channels. To wrap up, today we want you to take away 3 things. First, you can't talk about the homelessness crisis without talking about the housing crisis, period. Second, we're in an uncertain moment with changes happening regularly in funding and policy related to housing and homelessness. But third, good things are happening. Community members are rallying around solutions, and there are ways to get involved. And one last thing, back on that hope topic. I have hope that we can solve the homelessness crisis. It's a human-created problem, and it's going to take humans to get us out of this crisis. And we are those humans, and we can do it. I ask you to join us. Thank you.
Thank you for those moving remarks. I especially appreciate as a formerly unhoused Eugenian myself. Before we begin our Q&A, a special thank you to our award-winning public radio station KLCC for airing City Club programs on Mondays at 7 p.m. In the metro area of Lane County, they broadcast on 89.7 FM and in Florence on 88.1 FM. For those listening at home or on your commute right now, your household is one of several thousand tuning into City Club on KLCC, and we're truly honored to have you. You can also find all recent City Club programs archived at klcc.org, as well as on our YouTube channel and the City Club of Eugene podcast. Please think of some great questions for our thoughtful panelists. We'll have a short break before returning for Q&A.
I just want to say before we get started, please keep the question you ask to a minute or less so that we can get through many questions. And I think we're ready to go ahead and start with our first question.
Hi, how close? Okay. I'm Gary Ray Gray. I'm a board member on the Active Bethel Community Board. And we're concerned with the unhoused, like everyone else is. There are some statistics that I'm trying to figure out a bit. Approximately, I think you said 60% plus of the unhoused have some sort of disability, whether physical or mental disability. And in order to get SSI, I think the maximum is around $690. So an apartment, a single bedroom apartment at $1,400 is not going to work at all for those people. So what kind of housing is being discussed that can be utilized by someone who is on disability and can only afford much less than the $697, which is the maximum?
Thanks for the, is this, yeah, this is, okay. Thanks for the question. I think that this is where we talk about the need for housing at all income levels and in different types. So typically, to answer the specific question around someone who is particularly on disability, I think that comes through a mix of a huge capital stack of resources that need to come into that housing. So on the front end side, typically that's going to be a subsidized development. So that's going to be state and or federal resources that bring down the cost of the housing development itself and subsidize that over time. It is also then going to be a mix of, in all likelihood, project-based vouchers or Section 8 vouchers. Typically that is, those are going to be accessed through the Housing Authority for their own units. Sometimes that is with other organizations that they're able to get vouchers in, or into the private market that then really pulls that down, that really does hit that spread between what someone can afford on a 30% or so of their income and what the market is set. But if we're talking about large-scale housing that actually meets that need, it is not typically going to be the private market. It's going to be the affordable space, and that's going to be subsidized housing.
Next question.
Sharon Reed, City Club member. I've been watching with interest the construction along the West 13th. Does that have a name to it?
Ollie Court.
Ollie Court, thank you. When that is finished, how do you choose or prioritize the individuals going into those new places?
I'll speak as knowledgeably as I can, not being Jacob Fox. There is, we have preferred provider wait lists, I believe, where we work with the nonprofit organizations, the shelters across our community who have families who have been identified as needing housing, and we work with that list and move folks in as those units are available. Since it's a brand new development, they will all come available at the same time, and we will move folks in shifts. But it is through a coordinated system that all of the organizations share. Is that right? I'm looking at Jasmine. Jasmine and Isabel say yes, that's accurate enough. Thank you. Yeah, Ollie Court will come online sometime in 2026. We're super excited about it. It's both, housing, but it has a daycare center, a child care center in the middle of it, which is also another innovation that we think we need to look more at because we're also in a child care crisis across the United States and in this community.
Go ahead, Kellyanne.
Hi, my name is Kellyanne Stiles. I'm a Christian, a mother, grandmother of victims of survivors of sex trafficking. I'm also a member of Lane County Against Trafficking, and I'm so grateful to be a recipient of Homes for Good Section 8 housing that allows me to have a 2-bedroom apartment because I'm still hopeful to be reunited with my grandson one day since my daughter died as a victim in 2020. I just had a question about, there is more awareness about human trafficking, and January is National Human Trafficking Awareness Month, but I'm wondering, when I got my papers to sign up for Section 8, at the end of the list that they offered to people was survivors of sex trafficking. But I'm wondering how many of your staff and your case workers are actually trained about the red flags of sex trafficking victims, survivors, and their families, because I actually lost my first time on Section 8 because when my daughter was being trafficked and I wasn't aware of it, as she was living with me with her child, she was afraid to even allow me to get help for her the second time. But the first time, I had no clue originally, and she refused to sign paperwork because they would not allow her. So what kind of resources do you have available for survivors, well, for your staff to be trained, and then also if someone on Section 8 becomes a victim or someone who's living with them becomes a victim, what resources, if they try to get help and let you know, well, this is why I wasn't able to go to work or get childcare, or while I was traveling around America was because I was being sex trafficked. What would you guys know to do? Who would you know to contact? What help would you be able to offer so they don't lose their Section 8?
Question. Appreciate it. Yeah, of course.
Thank you. I think this is also an area where I'm less qualified to speak about the specific supports that exist in our organization. However, we have very well-trained and professional staff who provide case management support and lots of resources. We're connected with all of the other nonprofits in the community. Sexual Assault Support Services is one of the critical providers in this area who does connect with survivors of trafficking and provides confidential survivor support. So I'm not able to provide a really in-depth answer, but those resources are known to our staff. They are shared with our residents who come to us for help.
Yeah, and I can add there's a lot of grassroots education happening in that space right now too. Sarah Koski, who was a part of the communications team for a while for Act Now Lane, and then others. I was formerly a part of Junior League of Eugene. They do a lot of education around this as well. I think from an Act Now Lane perspective, one thing that we would like to be able to do is provide those resources and a place to find some of those resources. So Larissa mentioned our website, actnowlane.org. We're continuing to add things to that, and so I definitely want to put this on the list as somewhere that folks can go to find out more, and then potentially some education and training opportunities for those workers in those buildings and those organizations.
Next question.
Hi, my name is Garrett Epps, and I had the experience of doing some writing about the Grants Pass case, and I was really struck by the depth of knowledge that our Supreme Court justices don't have about homelessness. And I have two questions that statistical questions that you may not have answers to, but that go to some of the arguments that are made. And the first is I was struck by I think it was 80% are from Lane County, is something like that. Do you have any national or state figures to compare that with? In other words, some people would say, well, we're a magnet. We draw the homeless, because we are so much nicer than Grants Pass or wherever it is. And the second thing is, do you have a number or a percentage on the people that get up in the morning and go out of their tents and go to work because they have jobs? I think that's something else people are not aware of.
The thing that's coming to my mind, Karen, do you know if the HMIS questionnaire includes something about employment? I don't know that it does. I don't know that we have employment information, but that's an interesting question. Lane County was open to adding the question about where did, so I think they're always kind of open to conversations about, the types of information that we can be tracking to help understand the crisis better. What I can say is there's not a whole lot of national data when it comes to sort of migration of unhoused individuals, but there have been other studies in communities. I know San Francisco did a big study several years ago where they did look at this kind of the ratio of folks who become homeless in their community versus move here. It was a relatively similar ratio to what Eugene is looking at in San Francisco, so that's only one data point I have off the top of my head anecdotally. But I think, in the point that I made earlier, my question always with any of the data that we're accessing is trying to understand, what are we going to use it for? Mm-hmm. Knowing that number to what end, right? And so I think that that's a question that we need to get clear about as a community is, now that we have this data and we understand it, what do we do with it, right? How do we address the fact that there are folks who are coming here from outside of the community? And frankly, there's individuals who are, living on the streets in this community who are not counted in that homeless count because they're not accessing services, right? And so there's a lot of reasons why they are or not. And so it's complex, and you can't just put one single number or face or name on any of this. And so I think now that we have some of that data, I think it'll help us ask the next question of, okay, so what do we do with this? What does it matter? How do we actually use it to move the conversation forward?
Come on up.
Hello, my name's Maida Maxwell. I'm a sixth-generation person from Eugene and have been involved with the homeless community. I chaired the remodel of the First Place Family Center in 2006 that brought over 350 community members and 98 businesses to do the work, and have worked with Hosea Youth Services, spent the night with the kids and used the place over holidays. So I'm aware of what's going on. I think there's still tremendous confusion in our community about affordable housing and what it is. You know, people want to know a price point. So here's my two-part question for you. One is, what is affordable to the 4,500 people on the street? If we were to create housing that they could pay for, what's that price point? And secondly, for minimum wage workers that need a place to stay, what is their price point? And that would be different. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think that so typically in the affordable housing space, we are looking at getting rents to a place where it's about 30% of someone's income. So that number changes, obviously, based on what kind of income someone has. So to the question earlier around disability, that would change if you are a wage earner that is, you know, even full-time employed wage earners at minimum wage typically cannot afford what current market rates are out there, right? And so that is where the subsidy comes in on the affordable space. Again, that is typically on the front end with the development and or over time when you think about other types of voucher housing or whatnot. And something like permanent supportive housing, that typically also has state subsidy that comes in on a rent assistance on an ongoing basis. So it is oftentimes a pretty big web when you talk about affordable housing because there's a lot of flavors of affordable housing. But as an industry, usually what we're thinking about what is meeting affordability is when you're at 30% below of your income going towards rent. That allows you to pay rent. It also allows you to save for unexpected expenses and think about if possible, what your next housing option is.
Yeah, and what I would add is that, and I think Larissa or Karen touched on this, is there's ladder, right? And so a lot of affordable housing conversations are 30% of average median income or lower, right? And that's like the lowest, sort of like most in need without income coming in, right? And then you look kind of 30 to 60, 30 to 80%. And those are individuals who have some sort of income coming in, but again, it's much less than what the average median income in the community is. And then we're also looking at kind of 80 to 120% of average median income, and that's a lot of workforce, housing. So that's folks who are, in some cases, nurses, nurses, teachers, folks who are working in hospitality, some of our restaurant, so that's really where that kind of that minimum wage worker is kind of in that 80 to 100% AMI. And so the point is you have to look at housing across that spectrum because, to Karen's point, people's income change, right? And ideally, they'll be moving up that ladder and creating availability for the folks who are at the bottom too. So when you're talking affordable subsidized housing, it is always below 100% median income, and it really is that most necessary is really that 0 to 30%, which a lot of those folks are the ones who we have on our street right now.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Patrick Mercia. I've been a resident of Eugene for the last 8 years, but I've been working in affordable housing, rental housing finance for the last 25 years, most recently with Fannie Mae, and before that, Enterprise Community Development. I have a two-part question. First, I just wanted to applaud Lane County and the City of Eugene for following the Housing First model, i.e. Providing supportive housing without preconditions for sobriety or employment or treatment. It's been widely, I'm sure as you're aware, widely accepted as one of the most effective strategies to prevent long-term homelessness. I also know that it's under fire right now, that it's under threat from the current administration. in Washington. So curious as to how you're preparing or combating that tide. Secondly, I know that Eugene and the county, Lane County, has not fully embraced the concept of inclusionary zoning, or requiring new developments to set aside up to 20% of the units to be affordable. And I'm just curious as to why that is. I know that it has had mixed results, but it also has worked, especially in large cities. So curious as to your thoughts about that approach going forward. Thank you.
So one thing I'll say that about the Housing First. So a lot of our organizations across this community have embraced and accepted, Eugene and Lane County as well. With Act Now Lane, we haven't necessarily sort of said this is like what we're moving all things forward with, and we've really just taken a like housing period approach, right? And so we want to make sure that there's room for conversations about organizations that are prioritizing services and wraparound services and then moving folks into housing, and folks who are putting them into housing and then providing them the services. So supportive of that policy, and I think there's room for organizations that are making a difference with a different method. So I will just put that out there, as we've not had sort of a hard line in the sand of where Act Now Lane is on that. And I guess I'll let you touch on the other piece.
Sure. I think piggybacking off of that slightly too, I would say that there is real fear and concern around local providers, around changes that are happening federally. I think chaos is the point, and otherizing people and moving people out of systems of care is the point. And we are trying as a community to figure out what local resources look like, what statewide solutions look like to try to counter that. But the reality is the state cannot fill federal changes and clawback of funds, and it's going to upend a lot of really strong progress that has been made over the last couple years. And so I think everyone's in a bit of a wait and see mode, and what actually comes to fruition is, I think, anyone's best guess right now. To your other point around inclusionary zoning, I would just call out that the three of us are not policymakers. And I think that inclusionary zoning is one of a suite of really impactful tools that can be explored and is worth the conversation. And so I would encourage you to talk to local policymakers.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Thank you, Thomas Hura, City Club member since 2019. It was that year that I think I first came to the City Club and asked a question about the LGBTQ plus community and homelessness. That question was about being disowned by your family and how that can be a cause of homelessness for some youth in our community. And 7 years later, I would argue that folks in that community are no less safe, perhaps even at greater risk in our community and around the country and world. So what does your work endeavor to do to support the specific difficult needs of such a community?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, Thomas, I have friends and family who have been in that situation, and so I understand and empathize greatly with that scenario that a lot of folks find themselves in, unfortunately. And with Act Now Lane, I think the point, and I guess what we want to reiterate here, is that we are not trying to step in as service providers in the community, right? What we're trying to do is rally folks together who are providing those services, align the resources that we have, use them as effectively as possible, and to help educate folks. And so from an Act Now Lane perspective, again, I think our role goes back to that education piece, providing resources, providing access, letting folks know what does exist in our community to help support individuals who are finding themselves in all kinds of different and sometimes unique situations. So our hope and our goal is that we can broaden the coalition, as folks who say, we support this joint kind of collaborative effort, putting their name, signing on as a coalition member, and then, bringing new folks on to the committees and the steering committee to make sure we're representing a lot of those voices. So I know in this community we have a lot of organizations who are focused on serving that population, and we want to provide a voice to them. We want to amplify what it is they're doing. And so we're three of probably 18 different unique pieces of this steering committee that could answer that question differently. And so I don't want to share any inaccurate information about what organizations are doing what in that space. But what I can commit to is we want to help amplify those that are. And so if they're not already on our site, if we're not already sharing their resources, reach out. We want to do that. Anyone and everyone can help us get the word out about that. So,
Andrew?
Andrew Kallick, City Club member. Thank you all for being here, for your work. You said you like to dive into difficult topics. Well, the state has a land use system in place. It's very controversial. It's beloved by some. It's hated by others. Does Act Lane have a position on whether or not the state's land use laws should be amended, and if so, to what end and in what way? Thanks.
I can predict what Karen's going to say, and I just can't wait to hear it.
Writ large, Act Now Lane does not have a position on the overall state land use system in Oregon. Period.
I would argue, however, there are partners at the table who are intimately involved in conversations about the real barriers that that land use system is causing and creating. Homes for Good, Better Housing Together, Dev Northwest, these folks are every single day waking up and thinking about that exact problem and those exact challenges that we're facing. And the advocacy committee is really trying to make sure we can find a place that the city and the county can come together with service providers to say, okay, we could move these things. We could all agree on this being a solution. So it's on the table. There's not a generic position from Act Now Lane on that, but I will say, yes, it's challenging, and we recognize it, and we do think changes need to be made.
I can't believe I'm popping in. I can't believe I'm popping in to say there are businesses at the table as well who are themselves deal daily with the challenges of the land use system and our zoning laws, and themselves want to have more freedom, more latitude to build what is needed to meet our community needs, who are a part of this coalition, whose voices matter. And again, in the sense of we are a big table and we have lots of perspectives, they're there too, and this matters to them too.
It is definitely a voice the business community is bringing to that conversation is, yes, we have to fix our land use system. It's not working.
Do you have a question? Come on up.
Thank you. My name is Patrick Hosfield. I work here at the WOW Hall, and for a little while I was on the steering committee. And so I have a question about the communications role that you play with Act Now Lane. So there was an interesting op-ed some of you may have seen by Joshua Purvis in Lookout about the MUPD program, Multi-Unit Property Tax Exemption Program, and making it easier for citizens to sort of track progress toward those goals, how many units, et cetera. And it made me think that there maybe is also a need for that kind of a dashboard in a larger sense, because we hear a lot of things about big projects that may be breaking ground at some indeterminate point in the future, like near the Fifth Street Market, the Riverfront project, which maybe the public story now is it's been scotched, like what's going on there, the LCC building on Willamette, what's going on there. Is there a way for Act Now to sort of play that communications role? Have you thought about this, to let the people of Eugene know, like, what is the status of these big, high-profile projects that get announced and then most people have no idea what's going on for years and years?
Yes, I absolutely have thought a lot about this, and I think it's a role that I would absolutely love for us to get to be able to do with Act Now Lane. What I will say from the Chamber perspective, the Chamber of Commerce, we're working very closely with the city's Planning and Development Department right now, and identifying ways that we can do exactly that, create a dashboard where we can track, projects that are in the pipeline, kind of where they are in the process. More on the business development support side, we want businesses and developers to be able to know, like, where is their project at? How do we get more transparency into that process? Because it's one of the biggest challenges, going back to the land use conversation. It's state regulatory issues, but then it does come down to local permitting and processes that make it really hard to get things built. And our city has been a willing partner to have those conversations. Our county is a willing partner to have those conversations. And I think from a broader perspective, we would love to get to a place where Act Now Lane could have a dashboard that sort of tracks, like, here's our goal to get 38,000 units of housing built. Where are we at on that? Similar on shelter expansions, if that's the direction that our community decides to go. So yes, I think that is our ultimate place that we want to be. We did a lot of research and had a lot of conversations with communities across the country who have who've implemented these kind of community coalitions in their efforts to help reduce homelessness in their communities. And they're doing exactly that. And then they had to remind us it took them a while to get to that place. And so we hope that we can learn and go faster than some of these other folks have been able to, just because we can learn from them. But that's our ultimate goal.
Hi, my name is Mike Sachs. I moved here from Belgium in '94. And when I had just moved here, there was a homeless person trying to engage me in conversation, as often happens. And of course, I said, "Hi, what's going on?" And we started talking. And the person that I was with, my friend, said, "Come on, Mike, let's keep moving." And I have to say that I'm somewhat ashamed that I have come accustomed to that. I try to be nice, but I don't talk and stop with every person who engages me. And I feel like there's a lack of empathy in our society that makes people view each other as the other. And I'm wondering, even when we have people who get up and are homeless and get up to work, they're even afraid to say that they're homeless because there's such a stigma. So it's important to make decisions that are data-driven, but I also feel it's so important to get to know each other and to remove that stigma. And how can we increase empathy in our community? Because big change really can only come from stories from people that we get to know and start to appreciate and empathize with.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, Mike. I think that's a lot of what our Amplify work is about, is not just bringing back hope, but reigniting folks' compassion for people who are living different lives than they are. I think it's been a number of hard years with a lot of very visible homelessness and business owners, encountering people sleeping outside their businesses when they try to open in the morning. And there's a compassion fatigue that arrives, right? When you think, I need to open my business, I got to feed my kids. This person can't be sleeping here. And I think over time that compassion fatigue becomes apathy. And so bringing back that sense of people living outside are people. They're people like you, they're people different from you, and everybody deserves dignity and to live well. And I think that Act Now Lane's amplification work of talking about not just the good work that's being done, but the people whose lives are being improved and changed, we're hoping to reignite some of that empathy for those of us when we lose care, when we get a little burnt out and feel a little soul deadened, that we can remember that this is a human problem with a human cost and human solutions.
Yeah, and the thing that I would add to that is that I think we've made it even more complex and frankly easier for people to lose that compassion because we've allowed this this environment where some people, it's not even a lack of compassion, it's fear, right? We have real crime and public safety issues on our streets, and we have people who have been engaged in really frightening conversations with individuals who may or may not be unhoused, right? You can make an assumption when you see them on the streets, but that might not be their reality. But we've created a space where without that accountability to address the bad actors that are among the folks who appear to be unhoused in our community, not only is that creating an environment where people don't feel safe enough, honestly, to engage someone on the street, but also those unhoused individuals who are living on the streets are experiencing significant crime against them, and they are the victims as well. And so this is where if as a community we refuse to find a balance between that accountability and that compassion and I shouldn't say that because that's not either or. I think accountability is compassion. Between accountability and just kind of allowing whatever to be, we're never going to bring back compassion either, right? So I think that there's a role that our community has to play in making sure that we are protecting people and people are feeling safe. And I think that will also help people feel safer, feel more compassionate. But to Larissa's point, we're trying to humanize this crisis, right? Because if you become numb to it and it's just numbers, then you do take away, frankly, what I think is going to take to actually solve it is actual individual people reaching out and serving people too.
All right, that is all the time that we have today.
That's all the time we have for today. Please join me in thanking Larissa Ennis, Brittany Quick-Warner, and Karen Sachs. This has been our January 9th, 2026 conversation at the City Club of Eugene. We will be observing Martin Luther King Jr. Day next week, and I hope we will remember his legacy of civil rights and justice for the oppressed, especially today, living seemingly under a constant stress test of the safeguards for human rights that we all deserve. We will be back here in 2 weeks at the Wow Hall for our next forum on January 23rd at noon. That program will be about the Oregon Legislature's recent short session. It's sure to be a great forum, and we're looking forward to seeing you there. Thank you all. Have a great weekend or week, and we'll see you next time at City Club of Eugene.